with the trade deadline upon us and the Giants' first deal now just coming down. Let's hop in with our buddy Jon Heyman, joining the show, Audacy MLB insider Jon Heyman. Good afternoon / evening, sir. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing great. The first Giants move has just come down. We're still waiting to find out what they gave up. A little bit of a head scratcher. A.J. Pollock, the biggest name, coming from the Mariners to the Giants. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I guess they're concerned about Haniger with an injury. So, he gets traded a lot. I know that. It seems like he's traded very, very often. And, he's a professional player and certainly could fill in there in Haniger's absence.
When you look at Farhan Zaidi and still things on his to-do list, he did add a little bit of potential pop in the outfield, but what other moves might he be looking at in terms of bolstering a surprising team here at the deadline?
Yeah, they've done well. Give them credit. I would think they would look at a starting pitcher, and certainly Detroit with his old assistant Scott Harris running that with Eduardo Rodriguez and Lorenzen, that could make sense. Scooble's the third guy that they have, and there are a lot of potential starters still out there being talked about, whether it be Jack Flaherty, Mitch Keller. I don't think Marcus Stroman will be traded. They just traded with the Mariners to get Pollock, so I'm not sure if they're really going to trade Logan Gilbert, but there certainly are starters out there. And, of course, Justin Verlander is still out there, and I do expect him to be traded somewhere.
Okay.
By 6 o'clock.
Yeah, let's hear a little bit more about that for Verlander. Who are some of the teams chasing? Could the Giants be one of them? What's it going to cost?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know that definitively. I've heard 3 teams. The Giants were not one of those teams, but I would think so. He'd be a fit. They certainly could afford him, and we know Steve Cohen would pay down a lot of it anyway. And they do have the prospects. I mean, we know Houston has talked. And Verlander would approve going back to Houston, I do believe. He'd love to be back with the Astros, where he won some rings. And they don't have the prospects, though. They have nobody in the top 100. I think San Francisco's got some good young players, and they could work out a deal. And I do believe, Verlander has said that basically suggested that he's open to approving a trade to a winner. And obviously the Mets are not going for it this year. They've given up, and they've hurt their team next year by trading Scherzer already. So I do think he'd be apt to approve many teams. Whether he would approve the Giants or not, that I could not tell you. He wants to win. If he's got a bunch of teams that are looking at him, he may kind of lean him toward whatever he thinks is the best of the bunch.
How reluctant do you think the Giants will be, though, to part with some of their young prospects, many of whom have now made their way to the Major League club?
Right. They're already up at the Major League team. You're absolutely right. I think every team is reluctant to part with the best prospects. The Rangers were one that gave up a top 100 prospect in Luis Angel Acuna, Ronald's brother, and they jumped on that deal. Verlander has been better than Scherzer, so you would think they would get more for him. He does have that vesting option, which adds a little wrinkle to things for 2025 at $35 million. That could change the equation to some degree, but I think they're hopeful to get a top 100 prospect back for Verlander. I mean, look, the guy's got a 1.4 ERA over the last, I believe, 6 or 7 starts. Clearly been better than Scherzer, and you would think they would get more for him than they got for Scherzer.
MLB insider for Audacy, Jon Heyman, is with us here. Willard and Dibs, 95.7 The Game. The deadline coming up at 3 o'clock our time tomorrow afternoon. You mentioned Eduardo Rodriguez. Scott Harris, the former GM of the Giants, is now running the Tigers. Maybe they can get together there. That's a pretty good starter. I know it's not a household name, but it's a pretty good pitcher. What do you think that costs, John?
I think his value is diminished a bit by that opt-out with 3 years after that, because, it's better to have a rental than somebody with an opt-out with 3 years to go, because if he performs poorly or gets hurt, he just opts in, and now you're stuck with a guy. I mean, not that I'm wishing that on anybody or expecting it, but better to have a rental. So that does affect the value. Other than Verlander, he's the next best pitcher out there. And at this point, with probably 8 or 9 teams still looking at starters, and he's the second best one. Probably going to have to overpay a bit and give up at least a good prospect back to get Eduardo Rodriguez, probably a couple good ones.
What's the shortstop market like in terms of the ability for the Giants to find somebody to take a little of the pressure off Casey Schmidt and augment what they have with an aging Brandon Crawford?
Yeah, I don't think it's great. I mean, Paul DeYoung from the Cardinals is out there. Tim Anderson from the White Sox. Anderson not having his typical season. Other than that, not a ton of guys that are really out there at this point. So, not a great positional market is very, very weak at this point. With Bellinger presumably off the market, Richard and Crone traded. Candelaria has been dealt. Positional market at every position is weak.
John, looking at what the Angels have done since they were kind of the talk of baseball until a few days ago, and it's like, okay, Shohei's not getting traded. Instead, we're going the other way. We're going all in on seeing if we can win. Let's say they do. I know everyone's looking for Shohei info, and there isn't much out there. If the Angels make the playoffs, do they become a viable spot for him to stay?
People have kind of ruled that out. I wouldn't say it's zero. Look, the owner, Artie Moreno, has signed Mike Trout twice. He signed Pujols, Hamilton, C.J. Wilson, Upton, Rendon. He is the collector of stars. I think he's very happy there, and I'm not going to rule it out. I mean, obviously, they haven't been in the playoffs since 2014. If they get there, it might help boost them a little bit, but if he wants to go to a consistent winner, it might be difficult. If they, let's say they don't make the playoffs, then they've got Giolito and they picked up all these rental. They're all be gone. They don't have many prospects left. So their prospects for winning, no pun intended, are not that great at that point. So, I still think, though, that he loves it there, and he picked there in the first place, and they treat him well. So I think they have a chance.
Man, that would be an upset if he decided to stay with the Angels. We have the trade deadline now, 23 hours away. How much has the expanded wild card combined with kind of a lot of parity this year, how has that affected the amount of trades we're going to see between now and the deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the fact that there are many teams in the middle that aren't buyers or sellers, that kind of confuses things. We still haven't gotten a firm answer from the Padres. We assume after them swept the Rangers 3 straight at home, and if sellouts, it doesn't seem to be in their DNA to sell, but I mean, right now we have not heard from the Padres. It's not a clear signal whether they're buying or selling. The fact that there are 6 teams that make the playoffs, though, generally, you would think there'd be more teams apt to buy and go for it. The Mets did not. They gave up. We'll see about the Padres. The Cubs are kind of in the middle. They have acquired Candelario, so they appear to be a buyer. I think it opens things up, and there aren't that many teams that are clearly out of it. Like, there might be a third of the teams that are clearly out of it, and I think some years it'll be good for the trade market. Some years it'll be bad. It's better for baseball to have 12 teams in the playoffs.
Jon Heyman with us here on Willard and Dibs. Okay, John, 23 hours to go. What else do you expect in terms of the Giants? How active do you think they'll be? And what do they really need to do to be a legitimate contender?
Well, I mean, I think the starting pitcher, like I said, makes the most sense. So certainly Verlander or Erod, Eduardo Rodriguez would be fantastic. There are 5 or 6 other guys, Flaherty, Lorenzen, who are potentially out there. That to me makes sense for them. The other issue for them is, who's the most motivated? The most motivated is likely to get those top guys. Right now, they're in playoff position. And, with several teams right there on their heels, I would think they would be fairly motivated. Are they more motivated than a team that, pretty much locked into the playoffs? Yeah, I'm not sure about that, So, they are a team that has the money. They have the wherewithal to do it. And, certainly that's a factor with the Verlander because, he's got a lot of money left.
Yep.
So I look at it as I think they have a good chance to get one of the starters, and there's a decent market for starters. There's not a good market for position players, good market for starters, so they're not in bad position.
All right, we'll check it out. We're counting down, and on a busy time, we really appreciate you. Jon, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, that was Audacy MLB insider Jon Heyman here on Willard and Dibs.